Welcome back to Command Control Power, returning guest Adam Engst of Tidbits Content Network. It's great to see you again.
Hey, glad to be here, guys.
Great to have you. And this came up, I think, a few weeks ago when we had this pop up in the news about bootable backups, and you wanted to focus on this topic of how over time Apple's been really limiting the possibility of doing this, and to the point where they've completely broken the mechanism that allows for bootable backups. Is that a good overview? And what's your kind of take on that?
Well, that was true until yesterday
Oh,
when
really?
they sort of fixed it, but only
Okay.
sort of.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean it's a bigger topic, and part of where I kind of got into this is that like those of us who've been doing this forever, bootable backups, bootable duplicates, it's been a thing
Oh,
forever.
yeah.
We've really relied on this, and and over the past 5 years or so, it's been clear the writing on the wall is just like, do not expect this to be there in your time of need. Like
Right.
Mhm.
ideally it would be, you know,
Yeah.
the feature has sort of come, sort of gone, but I think what we're seeing is that it's not the reliable backup, frankly, that you want to have there for you. And it's not the data will be gone, it's the bootable part of it that's hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I was reading a little bit in that article that you wrote as well about, basically if that internal volume on the latest computers, if that's not functioning or has been wiped or what have you, you can't use the external anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
You boot from a bootable duplicate and bootable duplicate, and what you end up, you select the, you hold down the power key until you get into startup options, and then you select the drive, and then it asks you for your admin password
Right.
because
Hmm.
it needs to authenticate that you know what drive is booting your Mac, because that's a security problem, right?
Mhm.
If you
Right.
don't know what drive is booting your Mac, all hell could break loose. So it makes sense that Apple's doing this stuff, but the whole concept of the bootable duplicate in back in the day was that you could have your internal drive completely fail and
Hmm.
come up again very quickly with your bootable duplicate
Right.
and be
That
right where
that
you
was the
left off. No problem.
that was the promise. I mean, I don't know what everyone's experience has been, but I used to, recommend that to clients in that kind of mission critical. I mean, nothing we do is really mission critical in that sense, but we would, if sometimes they would say, I really can't have any downtime. Okay, well, we can use Carbon Copy Cloner, and just simple task in Carbon Copy Cloner would just clone everything bit for bit to the new, to an external drive. Going way back, those used to be hard drives. And, because we were used to like minutes long startup times and, click an app and it bounces about 10 times and then it's open, we would use external hard drives that were also spinning disks, rotational hard drives. And then at some point when we all got used to SSDs and really quick startup and actual like fast, responsive systems, we switched to, okay, if you really want a bootable backup, it would have to be an SSD for it to
Yeah.
actually be usable in practice. That was a small window until it became like, we just don't bother anymore.
Yeah. I had a 2014 iMac with an internal SSD. So it was a pretty fast machine. But its SSD failed. I think it was like early 2020. Can't remember exactly. And at that point in time, my bootable backup was on a hard drive. And it wasn't that like I sort of hadn't thought about it, right? Like
Right.
I've been doing this for years, and
Yep.
that's what I did, and it worked fine. It wasn't really a problem, and I was forced to bring that machine up on the hard drive, and it was not usable. It
No.
was actively not usable. Or like,
Right.
okay, this is. I mean,
Not
it
good.
lasted one boot. I'm like, okay, got to do something else. And I had an
Totally.
SSD around. I was able to deal with that. But that wake up call of
Yep.
SSDs for everything at this point. Unless you need big archival storage where a hard drive is still just too necessary. SSDs make so much more sense, and they're quiet. I don't like listening
Totally.
to hard drives all day long.
No. Yeah. I mean, in practice, has anyone here ever, I mean, besides your experience there, Adam, with that, that one instance, like actually had to use this with the client or with your own machines? Because I personally don't think it ever actually came up in practice where I said, oh, good, boot to your external,
You mean like, like you had it on site already at the client and they were able
Yeah.
to switch over to that one?
Right. Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember you had your side tools of your bootable backup or
That's
your
right.
bootable
Yeah.
drives, but
Yeah.
no, yeah, I think at most we had some clones through Carbon Copy Cloner and things like that. So on some servers we did have that going around when we had more servers in the way of like a file server
That's
or
true.
FTP server. But otherwise on client workstations it was mostly like a time machine or a cloud-based backup.
Right.
I used to use a bootable drive when I would send my Mac out for repair. I'd make a clone and then I would use my wife's computer to boot off of that and work a little while. And then if she needed it back, I'd unplug the drive and she would.
Yeah.
So I probably did that like 2 or 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Smart.
Over the course of the last 20 up 10 years. Yeah.
Commandeer her laptop for a while and just plug in your drive. Nice. I like it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the theory was always good. And what I think, and there's certainly plenty of people who have done this over time, and have the story of yes, I dropped my MacBook and was able to buy a new one and be up and running within half an hour, kind of thing.
Right.
But what I think a lot of people ran into is that there was often an unexpected hitch. Like for me, I had the backup, it was updated. I just didn't think about the fact that a hard drive was going to be too slow. Yeah. And okay. Just that was a complete loss of, I think I've been doing for months and months and months, well, years before that. And so I think, and so just to fast forward, and we can fill in the intermediate stuff. But so yesterday, Apple releases macOS 15.3 and fixes the bug in ASR, Apple Software Restore, which is the internal tool that all of the backup apps have to use now to make a bootable backup. They cannot do it themselves. They have to use ASR because Apple wants full control over anything that can make a bootable macOS system because of the sign system volume, all of that. It's got to be cryptographically secure. So I immediately, install make sure I'm running latest macOS 15.3, and I boot up super duper, and I make my backup and everything, and then I plug it in. I try to reboot and boot from it. Doesn't work. And the backup now works fine, and so I report this to the I know the guy who does super duper, and he's like, yeah, it's a bug, we know.
Still a bug. Wow.
Yeah, still a bug. We reported that one to Apple, and it didn't get fixed, because of this other thing that was sort of more important, and that was what they focused on. And apparently, you can reinstall macOS over on that external drive.
Over the clone, okay.
Basically, it's a cache that doesn't get rebuilt properly or something like that. So it's something fairly simple, but the point being that it gets back to that whole, like, if you're gonna think a bootable duplicate is your recovery device,
right,
make sure that it actually works.
Yeah, you've got to test
it. I mean, you got to test backups in general, but this one you got to test function.
Right.
Files can all be there.
Well, but to your point, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Like even if it does boot and you've got an SSD and it's fast enough, now your app's open and like Microsoft Office is not, authorized, is not activated. So now you've got to go through and like, where am I? Oh, I'm not even logged into my email, but like, do I have the right authentication app? And so then like, you've got to get into your email to be able to, to figure out like, I mean, a lot of other things. So it can be tricky. Like you could spend an hour just getting your system operational, even if everything Apple wise works,
And to Jerry's point, of using another machine, that's a classic one because suddenly you've got a new MAC address. It's a new, identifier. All those apps which are like, ooh, am I running on the right Mac? I don't think I'm licensed anymore. Go find your licenses, and so. Right. I mean, not to say that it's not a bad thing. It's more just that it may not be that like you will be up and running in 15 minutes.
Right.
Harping on what you said, Adam, too, is the point of how your backup hard drive didn't work. That's a piece that most people don't even try and check, home users or business users alike. It's just not something they look towards. Be like, oh, let me come in Monday morning and check my hard drive to see that in case of a disaster, something's going to happen. So it speaks to having multiple methods of backing up as well.
Yeah. So one thing we've been doing for many years now, I at some point came up with this joke that the Friday the 13th is International Verify Your Backups Day.
Nice.
Because it's when things are going to go wrong, right? You just know. So, but the point being is that, a Friday the 13th rolls around a couple of times a year. Everyone sort of knows that it's Friday the 13th. Just see if you can recover some data, because where it started from this is many, many years ago, mid 90s. Our neighbors were psychiatrists and they had a bookkeeper who had been, keeping their books and everything and doing a good job of backing up to tape, I think it was, every day, all that. And her computer dies. And she's like, no problem. I've got my tapes. And she puts the tapes in and the backups hadn't been working.
Oh, man.
The entire time. She had to enter 3 months of data by hand because of that. So, it's just, and she hadn't been doing anything wrong. She thought she had been backing up religiously. Yeah. She just never checked to see if it was actually working.
It's probably in retrospect. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this was a PC. So it was a long time ago, but and then actually someone else pointed out that he once was using some kind of internet backup system, and he'd done spot checks. So he downloaded a file or two, and they downloaded kind of slow. And he thought, at some point, like that was slower than it should have been. Maybe I should download more. Maybe it was just like searching. So it was, the first one was going to be slow for a couple. Sure. But then it turned out, no, it was not. That if he had to restore from that internet backup system, it would have taken weeks because for whatever reason, the performance was horrible.
Right.
And
so it's a different failure mode, basically, is like, the data's there, but you're dead in the water for weeks. I mean, that's also a failure. Yeah.
And that gets back to what Sam just said about diversity of methods, that, people often want to get into I use Time Machine. I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
no, you know what I hear all the time is I use iCloud backup. I'm good. And I'm like, not on your Mac. You don't,
I was going to say iCloud backup.
Yeah.
How long?
They're sure about it. They're absolutely sure about, I've got iCloud backup. I'm like, no, and I have to explain. It's like, I can't believe I'm still explaining that this is not a feature of the Mac yet. Any day now, maybe they'll add it, but a lot of people are under a false impression of that. So,
well, it was under iTools, I think, that there was a backup app.
That's right.
And so very long time ago. And I kept expecting, I still expect, I mean, like when it happens, I will not be surprised because I've been expecting this for years, is Time Machine via iCloud.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to pay Apple for some more service, some more storage. Wouldn't Apple like that? I mean, come on.
They love the monthly recurring. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, and this may be a hooray for Jerry moment, but let's go around the horn. And everybody's
we haven't had a hooray for Jerry. Usually it's not a hooray for Jerry story.
Everybody share with us, if you'd like, how your computer's backed up. Like how many different ways, what you're using.
Who wants to go first? Let's have Adam go first. He's the guest.
Okay, I'll go first. So Time Machine to an SSD, external SSD. Mm-hmm. Super duper nightly clone duplicate to another SSD. Mm-hmm. And
do you have to plug that in, or that's always plugged in?
Always plugged in. This is this is an iMac. Always plugged in. Okay. Yes, because actually that is a bit important thing. Is one of my rules: do as little as possible. Like you take the person out of the equation.
Right.
Backblaze. For internet backup for offsite stuff. And this is going to, I'm going to actually make a little bit of a jump here because these are not backup things exactly. These are get back to work after disaster things. Mm-hmm. So I use iCloud Drive and Google Drive, iCloud Drive, desktop and document syncing, and then Google Drive. A lot of the work I do for a local nonprofit, everything is in Google Drive. And so most of the files that I work on are in the cloud.
Mhm.
or
There.
they are in fact Google Docs, or I'm using a new word processor called Lex. They're cloud-based tools. So
Right.
again, the data is not on my machine. And again, those are not backups. Very, very clear. This is not backed up data.
That not only that, I think you've just made this point, but that data
Yeah.
also can't be backed up in a certain sense, right? Like,
In
I mean, the
some
data that
ways, yeah.
syncs to your Mac, sure. Like,
Yeah.
but if it's literally just on a web interface,
Yep.
if they're
Yep.
down, you're down.
Oh,
So yeah.
I desperately need to keep looking into this. There used to be an app called Cloud Pull.
Okay.
And Golden Hills Software, something like that. And what Cloud Pull did is it logged into your Google Drive and downloaded all the documents, the Google Docs and Google Sheets, and converted them to Office documents.
Oh, interesting.
I'm like, I mean, like, and that's what I want, because like that's a backup, right? I mean, you can. I don't know how you back up Google Docs in any other way, because it's always, in the Google Cloud.
Yeah.
And so I've been looking for something like that. This has been gone for years now, but I thought it was a brilliant approach to being able to keep, if my world falls apart, I've got all my data. So anyway, so thing 4 after Time Machine and Super Duper and Backblaze is cloud-based storage, and that's mostly because I also thing-based 5 have 2 Macs. So I have an iMac and I have an M1 MacBook Air, and partly because the desktop and document syncing, I actually switch back and forth between them multiple times a day sometimes, and I can just keep working. Again, use Arc, so all my web stuff is completely synced between the two, et cetera, et cetera. But that second Mac is really important. Because if you have one Mac and it dies, or you drop it, or it's stolen, or it's burned up in a fire, or whatever, you're dead in the water. Doesn't matter what kind of backups you got until you get a new Mac. And that can be quick for some people. I don't happen to have an Apple store within an hour of my house, so it's not an easy thing for me. But I really truly believe that we need to stop thinking a little bit of backup and think of get back to work.
Yeah.
That's really the key. And so in that respect, having a second Mac using cloud storage will get you back to work faster.
Right.
And I would argue faster than having a bootable duplicate. I mean, I literally can walk around my desk, sit down at another machine, and be back and working. If my iMac were to die in this instant, I could be up and running in minutes.
Yeah.
I love. Sorry, go ahead,
John. You go.
I love the factor of the second Mac, though, because I actually have one too, and it's mostly just out of laziness, because like I have a laptop, but I got it all set up where I have my big screen and everything like that, so it's all connected in like a dock. And I'm like, I don't want to unplug all that when I go downstairs. So I have another Mac that I was using for testing. And I'm like, I'm just going to put all my stuff here too. Yeah. So like it's total laziness, but it helps tremendously because, as you said, with the same situation, if this Mac were to die or something were to happen, obviously if a disaster were to occur, both would be gone. But getting to the backups piece of it, I do. I have a Synology that I do Time Machine backups to, and then I have Backblaze for cloud-based. I'm pointing up to the cloud, and for all our radio listeners,
Time Machine, Backblaze,
Time
cloud.
Machine, Backblaze. This guy says what do you want from me. And the other piece of it that I was going to say, and to Adam's point about the web-based docs. So I used SharePoint with Microsoft. So that is, of course, in the cloud as well, synced to my computers, not a backup, as Adam said. But I use, and other people that listen to the show use other services. I use Backupify to capture that data as a cloud-based backup, like secondary cloud-based backup for that data too. But I love the second Mac option. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's like it's like the ultimate easy one to just shift over to.
So with SharePoint and Backupify, are those all Office documents so that it doesn't have, they're not cloud-based documents then?
Yeah, no. I see what you're saying. Where like they're physical.
They're not documents. Like Google Docs.
Yes, exactly. They're all documents.
I said I'm still looking for something to replace Cloud Pulse. That's why I was curious.
That's interesting though. Yeah, because I was thinking about that because it has a backup for Backupify, and other services have a backup for Google Workspace. But your point is, it's not a physical document. It's a web-based doc.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious. I'll have to look into that.
Well, and two, I mean, it's interesting because I use Google sort of in two ways. One is where it's like Tidbits writing and TCN writing, where it goes away within a week. So like it's just not that big a deal if I lost something. I mean, I would be annoyed as all get out, but it would, it's really I can only lose like an article or an issue at a time. But then there's for the nonprofit stuff that I work on. It's a lot of files, but it's also a lot of Google Sheets, a lot of Google Docs, and those I'd be utterly distraught if something happened to those. I don't know how to fix that in any way at this moment, because they're so like I have a Google Sheet a Google spreadsheet which has like 30 sheets in it. And it's, this massively complicated, all sorts of lookups and things like that. No, I literally don't know what I'd have to do. How if I could recreate that. It would be too hard.
It's especially the more proprietary it gets like that, the harder it is to. It's not, you can't just download to an Excel format, or CSV if it's also using the built-in functions of Google Docs, which don't really, or Google Sheets, which don't exist in some of these other apps. So, yeah, that's really tricky. There's oftentimes not a one-to-one sort of thing like that. I keep it simple. I mean, this is, go ahead, Jared.
Well, hold on, Joe. Just to take that a step further. So indeed, if you had a piece of software that would do this churning in the background and doing file conversion, it would almost have to run all the time, because every time it sends an update, it would have to keep on updating itself.
Yeah. That was how Cloudflare worked. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of heavy lifting. And this is like so interesting because very few of our clients and myself, admittedly, I've never thought about that. But that's like incredible. I mean, to think about.
And part of the reason why we have never thought about it is that, in fact, the availability and uptime of Google Docs is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably been down, but I haven't noticed. Occasionally I'm in situations where I have to use the offline extensions because I just have no connectivity. But as a result, they just don't lose data. And this is Google, right? This isn't like there's a hard drive somewhere with your Google Doc on it, right? This is shards, all data centers all over the world, massively replicated, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's not a simple file scenario,
right?
Which means you're very, very unlikely to lose data. However, you are more likely to have is, well, not us probably, but what happens if you forget your password? What happens if someone compromises your account and goes in and deletes everything? Those are the kinds of risks that having some local backup protect against, and you can't do it with the online documents.
This is why I don't like the purely web-based tools like that. I tend to avoid tools that are just proprietary, like web-only services, even if they have an app for the various devices. If they're not, if it's not saving a copy of the file that I can open locally, preferably with more than one app, ideally, using industry standard tools, then that's always going to be a risk. But then at some point it tips to the scale you're talking about, where Google Docs is like, well, if they're down, we've got bigger problems. If they have a data loss bug, we've got really big problems. And most people actually experience the other side of this, which is like, I don't need backups because I use Google Docs. Hey, my kid just got a new computer. Okay, do they need to migrate anything? No, they don't care. They signed into iCloud. They just go to the web, and now they're
all their stuff's there.
I don't care. Yeah, I'll set a new desktop background. Doesn't matter.
And I don't want to pick on Google entirely here, because another thing this nonprofit, everything the communications team of this nonprofit does is in Canva. Online graphics and layout system, and it's brilliant for collaboration and all of that. I mean, it's truly a good system for that kind of thing. Way easier than everything we'd done before in terms of first InDesign and then Affinity Designer and all that kind of stuff. And it's just there for everyone all the time. And so is our stuff backed up? Well, within the Canva cloud, probably. Yeah. And we have multiple users who can access it, and et cetera, but it's still that there's a point of failure, and I don't know how you predict against those points of failure. I mean, and I mean, to be fair, like I've never had a problem, so these are all theoretical issues.
Totally, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll give you my methodology, and then we can have the hooray for Jerry as the final update there.
Actually,
So
I think Adam already might have me beat. So
he might. Yeah, he has all of us beat. It sounds
I was
like.
deflated as soon as he
Yeah.
started talking. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got an SSD that is using Carbon Copy Cloner. So it's just a Carbon Copy Cloner backup. Obviously not bootable, but I believe, and this may have changed because of this, but I thought that I could restore from this using like Migration Assistant, essentially.
You still
okay,
can.
so that, and thank you for confirming that. And so that's kind of my plan there, and that's just an extra, that's my local backup, obviously. And then I've got Backblaze, so that's it. Just simple, one local backup, one offsite backup. And like you, Adam, I use cloud services, cloud syncing, so iCloud Drive, Desktop and Documents, and Dropbox. Those are the two primary ones that I use. So most of my like changing data is there, or like we haven't talked about, just things that are sitting in email or other inherently sort of cloud syncing type services. So yeah, that's my method.
Well, an email is another interesting one. I actually I've actually got a TCN request for this, and I'm sort of writing about it now because it's not a topic I knew a huge amount about.
Oh, good. I'm going to wait on this because I've been looking into this one. I'm waiting for your article. This is great.
I was going to say I want to know what you're doing too, because basically there are quite a few services that will back up Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, and one of the things they focus on is email, because if you're doing cloud-based email, IMAP or Exchange or Gmail, all your email is probably up in the cloud, and it's probably not on your Mac in a useful backupable way. And so, but there are services that allow that. That you can back that up, and I don't know how well they work exactly. I'm sort of assuming they work well because they certainly charge enough money, and they're clearly aimed at enterprises. So, damn it, they better work. But
I think Sam and Jerry have more experience, with this. And I think from my perspective on this, I have my email backed up, not backed up, backed up, saved locally because it's synced to my Mac, so it is stored in its entirety, and it's therefore in my backup systems, which gives me a level of peace of mind. However, when I've had to deal with this problem for clients where they lose their email and it's, it's gone from the server, and therefore it's also removed from their Mac, and we have to restore from Time Machine or let alone Backblaze, that's not a fun project to restore the email like database locally or the individual inboxes and whatever, and like manually put it back. So that's what I think the role of these backup services specifically for email is. And I know, Sam, you've been talking about it for quite a while, and Jerry, I know I've talked to you about it recently as well. So what do you guys both use for that? And I'm sure Adam's taking notes here.
Yeah, well, it's the same Backupify service for me, which is now owned by Kaseya. But they in terms of restoration and
owned by Voldemort.
What's that?
Owned by Voldemort.
Doesn't Kaseya also own Datto and one other one too?
Yeah, so Backupify was part of Datto, and that's what Kaseya bought. And I can't say I'm thrilled about that necessarily, but it does the job. And I've never had, when I've needed a restore, it's done the job, even for an individual email or an entire folder, directory, or whatever. I've never had an issue. So I can't really complain, although the evil overlords own it, but it works great. And it's super easy to set up. So I just kind of set it up and walk away, if you will.
Sam,
I thought you were a Dropsuite guy.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying how much you love Dropsuite, because that's what I use.
No, no.
Oh, interesting.
Someone else in the chat, in one of the shows, had mentioned Dropsuite.
I see. Yeah. So Dropsuite was just acquired like 2 days ago by a company that I've never heard of before. But what I like about Dropsuite is it's super cheap, and the client has an instance where they can log in and see all their backed up email. So and it backs up everything.
So that's what I was going to get at earlier too, because it's not only about being able to restore the data, that's great, but having immediate access like that, that's a huge feature. Whereas if I have to go through a restore process, not only is that really onerous to put it back in place, but I can't really actually get into my email until then. But Jerry, so you're saying Dropsuite has that. Sam, does Backupify have like a live, like you can just log into the Backupify service and actually
client side,
client, like go through your inbox, go through your sent, that kind of thing live, or is it just for restoration?
Yeah, no, well, I think it's the same concept that we're talking about, but I can provide an admin login for the client and they can see their particular instance where I can see everything. And then they can look at the latest backup from today, or they can go back to a historical date and time and grab what was there.
And
And
just
how
to be clear,
all
you
in
can
do you-
literally scroll through, like you scroll through your inbox and
You could, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I use the
Okay.
search functionality because I know what I'm looking for, but you could search
Got
for a
it.
specific folder or content.
What I liked about Dropsuite 2 when I first signed up was the ease of sign up, the fact that you could sell it as an MSP, and their pricing is not transparent, so you can put a little bit of markup in there. What are the steps to get involved with Backupify? Do you have to drink the Kaseya Kool-Aid, or what do you got to do there, Sam?
That's pretty simple. I mean, again, I'm pre-Kaseya, so nothing has necessarily changed except for my login. But
And how many times have you been billed for the same product?
oh my God, I can't. We could do a whole show about that. It's ridiculous how many back and forth emails and conversations we had. At the same time, sorry, Adam, I don't mean to hijack this conversation, but at the same time of getting multiple bills, I'm also getting multiple phone calls from sales about what other products I should buy. I'm like, well, fix this first, and then maybe we'll talk.
Right.
So has anyone used Cube Backup?
Cube?
Cube.
No, I haven't.
CUBE. It looks a little interesting because they claim that basically they're quite cheap, but you provide your own storage, local or remote. And
Really?
and I could see some places being like, oh yes, we want our own local storage, so we have on premises, and it was like, if I remember the numbers, it was kind of stupid cheap. Let me look at this pricing.
What?
Yeah,
Really
like
cheap.
$5 per user per year.
Per year. Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's really cheap.
And then for education nonprofits, $2 per user per year. So
Wow.
I was sort of like, well, that's kind of hard to pass up in certain cases, but you've got to have the storage, and so you'll be paying more if you're doing like S3 or whatever.
Right.
But I thought that was an interesting alternative to I said I hadn't really Backupify doesn't seem to be the term I'm seeing anymore with Datto and Dropsuite. MSP 360 also popped up, but they seem to do everything in sight.
Yeah.
And I can't figure it out.
There's also Microsoft. If you're using Microsoft 365, they have I guess an offering. I forget what it's called. Jerry, you may remember. It's probably just
but it's
Microsoft
equivalent to the
Backup
but it's equivalent to the fox guarding the hen house, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's where I would go there too.
Right. And I mean, so the pro I was going to offer is like, it's native, it's built in, it's first party, just click a button in theory, and then you've got the data. But yeah, to your point, I mean, then you're just relying on, the same company.
The other ones that trickled up for me, Cloud Ally, Spanning, and Spin.ai. I don't know if any of you've heard of any of those. I mean, honestly, they're hard to like talk about because they all do exactly the same thing.
Right.
You're reading it, and you can oh, we do X. Yeah, so does everyone else. Like that's not actually a differentiator the way you think it is.
Right.
So it's a little hard to
Right.
figure out what the differences were.
Yeah, what happened to Wasabi? That was like the flavor of the month there for a while for a lot of ACNs. Everybody's talking about that.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I know about Wasabi from this just plain storage standpoint, but
Maybe
I didn't know if
that's
they did
all they
backup
do
stuff.
then.
Yeah. I had a friend in Australia who was pricing out internet backup stuff, and he's pretty technical, and so he was actually looking at ARQ, and various cloud storage things. But because he knows Australia, he was paying pretty close attention to the throughput that he would get.
Yeah.
And Wasabi, I think it had an Australian data center. So it looked like they, were going to be a little faster in certain ways, but I'm not sure if it worked in his testing. Maybe he was doing the theory and then he was going to test. And so, yeah, it's like, but stuff you got to think about if you're going to be backing up a lot of data, and you're somewhere which is not standard in terms of, yes, I'm down the road from a data center on the internet, so to speak. So, yeah, so it's all very interesting. And, I mean, I guess what this sort of gets back to again is that level of, how do you get back to work, and what kinds of risks are you preparing against? So, like the old risks used to be so physical, right? It was the hedge crash. Your
Yeah.
drive, you heard it screeching, and you're like, oh, that's bad,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, the problems are likely to be as much security as anything else, or like this email stuff that we're talking about. You're doing a migration from one system to another, and you need a backup to make sure that, when it comes, if something goes wrong and during the migration, you've got another system, or an employee has left and you need to archive their email so that someone else can access it, in an archival fashion later, so like all of these things they're not quite what we used to think of in terms of the risks. And then of course there's the wildfires, which are going to like destroy everything for, a 15 block radius. So, changes the game.
It really does. Yeah. One thing that came up when we were talking about this topic of backups was, especially of email backups, was like pick the right one from the beginning. And I think, Sam, did this come up for you when you were thinking about like migrating to a new backup service? And like you can't really migrate historical email backups, right? So if the data on the server is different now, but you still want to keep the, 10 years prior to that, or whatever it is for like litigation hold, or what, 7 years or something like that, you can't move the backup data to a new backup service. So you probably need to like keep the old backup service in place before you switch to a new one.
I see what you're saying.
Switch.
Right.
So maybe something to kick around for the article.
Right. I'm
interesting.
In my opinion, I'm kind of stuck with Backupify, like it or not, even though they got bought out, because of this same issue, because it's a proprietary format. Or even if you wanted to grab that data, like I tried this with Barracuda, who also has an email backup platform, and the amount of money to transfer that data out was tremendous. And I was like, it's I'm telling you, you can't do it. So we actually have, the company actually pays a maintenance fee to keep that data there, because you have to.
So I will admit, I'm not sure this was intentional entirely on my part, but one of my sort of rules has been to keep everything online at all times. And by online, I mean sort of accessible from my Mac. And whether that's, like I don't ever archive mail out of Gmail or anything like that. The whole thing's always there. And there's a little bit of that reason of like, I don't want to create situations where something exists in a particular spot and then like we change and there's another spot, because those old spots always go away. So here's my example of that. As I've been running this Tidbits Talk discussion, it's discussion forum now, but it's gone through like, I don't know, 4 technology changes, something like that. And after each one, like I have the archives, but I can't bring them forward. Right. Like they're just like, it's too hard. And I really feel badly about that, but it's, it just turns out that you can't always move things forward in a useful way. And this is another example of that, like, yes, I've got all my historical backup data, but it's like, if I can't bring it somewhere else, I got to pay a maintenance fee forever.
Yep. Or for a certain period of time until you're ready to let it go,
precisely.
And you've got overlap. Now you're paying the new company to start the archives here, and then 10 years down the road, then we can cancel the old one when we know we've got everything in the new one. Yeah, it just seems it's an interesting factor in terms of like backups, especially with email, and when you want to keep that data, excuse me, that another employee might have deleted or something like that. Right, where like you don't, like for our own data, that's one thing. Like you, Adam, I would keep all my email live, essentially. But if there's an employee working for a company and you want to be able to have the record of everything they sent and received, maybe even for a few years after they leave the company, and you can't rely on the fact that they didn't delete it from their current archive that you still maintain. You've got it in the old backup service. So that's the part that you need to keep paying a maintenance fee on.
Well, and of course there's certainly issues with seat licenses for all the various software that you might need, and if no one's using it, I'm not going to keep paying that seat license. But you need to keep the data. So it's tricky stuff, and I mean, it's one of the things I sort of ran into in this article is I can say what the problem is, and I can offer some sort of general solutions, but man, it feels like this is something you got to talk about. You got to find out what it is you actually need to protect against, what your variables are, where your pain points are, that kind of thing, because it's not a one size fits all solution in any way, shape, or form. And that's true of backup in general.
Yeah, and you're talking more disaster recovery overall, essentially. Right. And is this
Precisely.
something I wanted to ask you about this, Sam? And I don't know if you've played with this, Jerry, like in terms of your offerings to clients, but I'm pretty sure you brought this up at one point, Sam, as like an offering where you would like, you kind of like, as Adam is saying, like maybe you ask your client, what are the things you're concerned about? You know, what are the timelines of like, you need people to be functioning? You know, what are the kinds of things I can recommend to you that might be things to worry about, you know, and so what is this general concept? I know a lot of our colleagues do this. I don't have a lot of experience doing it though.
I think Adam actually called it out a little earlier about like saying kind of like, how long are you willing to be out for in a way? Because that's the way I pose it a lot of times too. Like I mentioned on a recent show about how we had a client where their Synology just crapped the bed. And that was one of the customers who were like, well, you could have a secondary Synology. Yes, it's like you're paying for it just to have that data cloned over. But if you need to be up and running within moments, that is your answer. Whereas I had to go on site 2.5 hours the next day. Well, actually 2 days later after we ordered something, and that put them out for a while. I was able to restore some data from backup just temporarily to get them to work, but it wasn't efficient. So anyway, to your point, Joe, it's a question that I try to ask, which is like, how long are you willing to be out for? What can that do to your business if you're out for 3 days, a week, whatever?
Right.
And usually they try the cheapest option possible. It's just
it's not cheap. Being able to sort of the hot swap because in some sense, like think about it, the ultimate hot swap is like you've got the secondary office with all the desks there and a working machine, and so everyone literally walks to the new office and starts and sits down and works again. Like, I mean, that's insane. No one's going to do that, but that's what you're talking about. If you like, I can afford 5 minutes of downtime. Yeah, you know, my business dies if I'm down. Okay, you're gonna pay it a lot.
It's like this clone government that's able to operate out of Cheyenne Mountain or something like that, where you've got like a duplicate of every person in every position, or at least desks waiting for them, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, exactly. The sky's the limit, really. I mean, do you want to hire a second person who's just on standby in case anybody's out sick? Like,
it's called an understudy, right?
Or, yeah, exactly, right. You do it. Yeah, that's right. There's precedent for that too. So there you go.
I think they have like a Progressive commercial that does something similar where like someone can't finish the job and they just call in like a backup person to do the taxes or something like that. It's very similar thought process there, but kind of funny nonetheless.
These are difficult conversations to have with clients, this risk aversion. And I always feel like a life insurance salesman, and I don't like them. And most times clients don't want to spend any money. Sam has mentioned, he's had firsthand accounts of guys who've gotten bitten who never thought they would be able to, right? You had a couple of people you mentioned on the show.
For sure.
So these are, I mean, I don't know. It's a challenging dialogue to have with someone, especially this is not what we do. We're technical people for the most part, and we're not salesmen. A competitor of all of ours, for a long time in Connecticut, had a professional salesman on the road selling what we do and what they do. So
it's particularly hard because, again, like the people don't necessarily understand where the true risks come from.
Right.
Yeah.
That it really is not about the hard drive failure anymore. I mean, or, and like, oh yeah, if I drop my MacBook and broke the screen and it won't boot, I could get another one, by going to the Apple store downtown and I'd be up and running. Well, yes and no, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's one thing to protect against, but there's a whole lot of others, and a lot of them are much more amorphous, such as, not so much probably our client, your clients, I mean, in the sense of our world of Apple, but, oh man, if you're in the Windows world, ransomware.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just horrible.
It really is.
And you've got to be doing, offsite backups to immutable storage, and you've got to be having incredible levels of security that looks for all the telltale signs. So, you're not backing up encrypted data and all that kind of thing. I mean, that's what you have to do. And I'm sort of glad we're in the Apple world where that's really not a significant concern at the moment. But yeah, that's just so scary.
Yeah.
I can't
really
imagine
true.
being on the Windows side and seeing something like that happen. It's just,
Yeah, no.
it freaks me out to think about it because I have some Windows clients, and this is the type of stuff, as I've said on previous shows, that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
No,
freaky.
I had to laugh earlier. I forget who said something about, backing up. Was it like it was a few months old or something? Oh, 3 months of data was your
Yeah.
your
Yeah, yeah.
example,
A
Adam.
bookkeeper, yeah.
They had to re-enter, and I had a call with a client today who said, I bought that thing that you told me to get. It's that white thing. I'm like, is she talking about a time capsule from like 15 years ago? Like, I hope she's not talking about that. And I'm like, what time frame are you talking about? I hadn't talked to her in like 2 years. I'm like, what is this hard drive? So sure enough, she had a little G drive, a little hard drive. And she says, I don't know how to back up. I'm like, you just got to plug it in, whatever. But in the meantime, she had got a new computer anyway, so it wasn't going to back up anything. So anyway, we reconfigured it and blah, blah. And I said, I'll just give you instructions. And she said, I'd rather just have you do it like once a year. And I'm like, once a year? I mean, what is that even for? Like at that point, like you might as well just start from zero. Like, a year-old data might be worse than no data. Like,
And,
you know what I mean?
well,
Like an old version of a
so-
file or something. Like, yeah.
So there's I think this is actually evidence of an attitude.
Yeah.
And it's the same attitude as I'm not interesting enough for anyone to hack me.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right?
Right.
Like,
Totally.
and you keep trying to tell people no one cares how interesting you are.
Right.
I mean, it's not even people who are doing it, it's bots.
Yeah.
You're not going to get hacked by a person because you aren't that
Right.
interesting. You're going to get hacked by bots.
Right.
And this is the exact same thing. Oh, I don't have anything that's worth staving. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't be all that cut up if I lost my computer, that kind of thing. Oh,
Right.
wouldn't you? Well, what about all your photos? What about your tax returns? What about and so I
Totally.
really do feel like it's that I'm not special enough attitude. And people need to be kind of slapped back and forth a little bit. It's like, yes, you are special. Damn it.
Right.
We're going to give our
bonus
clients
environment.
your number.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
just
Yeah.
Call,
You do our
if you don't-
sales. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't want to back up, just call this guy. Just
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. They have a hard time like visualizing like what are the reasons why, like what am I worried about, what's the issue, and I just sometimes I tell people like put yourself in this position, like you turn on your computer and it doesn't turn on. Like what were you going to do? What were you trying to do that you can't do now? Well, email, fine. I could do it from my phone, whatever. But, let's go down the road a little bit. What if, is it your photos? Is it is it projects you've created from your photos that literally don't live anywhere else? Is it, so yeah, it's hard to get to that
I'm
point
just thinking
sometimes.
about something here, Joe. Like it would be
Yeah.
great. You know how like Know-Before is a service that trains people and things like that. It'd
yeah.
be great if you could have some kind of like simulations that the employees don't know are coming.
Yeah.
Almost like a fire drill in the school where all of a sudden their screen goes like, you've been infected. And then you're like, oh my God. Like, just something to see what would the fire drill would cause. How would they react? What would they do?
So there's actually an easy way to do that. Take their computer. No, seriously. I mean, like literally IT, have someone, obviously IT would have to be sort of aware of it.
Yeah,
but basically I took your computer. How are you going to get your work done today?
Smarty
Smarty pants.
What's
I mean,
like, it's like that show there.
Scared
there's a
Straight.
show like or like I
Scared
was thinking
Straight.
like what would you do? It's like in that situation. There's like a hidden camera, and they're like, we've secretly taken Bob Smith's Mac from his desk. Like let's see what he did. Like how long before he actually calls IT? Like maybe he wastes half a day on his phone anyway. It's like
but I mean that's really what it comes down to though, because people cannot imagine losing this thing. Because there's so many ways to lose it now in the sense of your password, your hard drive, your network connectivity, like so many things can go wrong. But there's that little bit of took your computer, what are you gonna do?
Right, what are you gonna do now? That's a good call. So Adam, I wanted to bring up one other topic here, I think. Well, so let's see. One other thing on backups was with something like Dropbox, and I wanted to get everybody's thoughts on this. So you've got let's say a company relying on Dropbox, and they've got terabytes of data. Let's say it's 20 terabytes of data or something. So there's no practical. I mean, there's a way to back that up. You have a dedicated, Mac Mini and a Promise RAID or something. Now you're talking expensive. Maybe use an OWC like dual drive enclosure. I don't know, but so there's probably cheaper ways to do it. But it's probably going to be at least a few $1,000s. Some amount of ongoing maintenance to like check on it, make sure it stays up to date, make sure it's still backing up. This is to have a local repository of that data. So I don't even really call it a backup. I just call it like a Dropbox repository. Or you can make the same, examples with other services. I'm questioning lately if it's even important to do that, because you're talking about a service that you're relying on not only to store the data, but to actually enable collaboration. So without the collaboration happening, then you don't have, you can't really function anyway. So sure, you've got peace of mind that your data is physically sitting over here in case anything goes wrong, but really you need the service to be online. You need the internet to be active, so anyway, what I've been doing is Dropbox just has great features to be able to restore data. Even if somebody deletes, we've had this happen at one of our clients a few times where same employee did a cleanup on her Mac of like data, like the Mac was like, you're running low on space. I'll helpfully suggest a bunch of things you can delete. And she's like, oh, I don't know why I have all this stuff. And it's like stuff in her Dropbox that everyone else has, right? So she deletes a bunch of stuff. We get phone calls from everybody else, and then we have to go into Dropbox and just roll it back, like restore the files that she deleted. Very easy, better than a backup that I would do myself. So, for me, I'm moving away from like insisting on that. It's hard for me to say don't worry about it, or like I don't recommend it, but as of now, I'm okay if they don't do it, as long as they kind of sign off on it.
The 20 terabytes is a bad example. It's a hard example.
Yeah.
Because that really is like oh, wow, that's a lot of data to be moving back and forth and things like that. Mm-hmm. Some of these services, I can't remember which ones offhand. Let me think. Cloud Ally, at least, backs up Dropbox as well. So, you can have, cloud to cloud backup stuff.
Yep.
I don't think that will get you up and running. Like, I don't think you can just work from it in a collaborative way.
Even in Sam's example earlier, I was going to say with the Synology, it's not a flip of a switch necessarily. Like, you actually have to like retrain people or give them a new link or... Right. I mean, so with any of these cases, like even if you can, like you've got it there, you actually, there's some steps before you can just dive right back in.
And this gets back to that sort of the testing and, I'm going to take your Mac, it's sort of in the, it's not, I'm going to take your Dropbox, but literally what happens if you can't get on Dropbox? For whatever reason,
exactly.
What do you do? And how do you respond to that? Because as I said back before, the backup is one thing. It's the how do you get back to work?
Yeah.
And the answer may simply be that it's not as easy as it used to be. If you're talking terabytes of data that's sort of in play, that's not going to be fast no matter what you do.
Yeah.
And short of the hot swappable, we keep everything in both Google Workspace and Microsoft 365, and we can flip a switch. No one does that. So I think perhaps what we've simply run into is the world is a much bigger and more complicated place technologically than it used to be.
Right.
And we rely on a great deal more of that infrastructure to exist to get our work done.
Yeah. I was trying to think of an example in like that people can understand. Maybe, you've got power coming into your home. Well, you can have backup power. You have battery backups. You have, I've been using these EcoFlow products that they're like a power station, portable power station type thing, which have like, all the features of a UPS and more. Like they last for like hours. And so there's great ways to back up your power. Your internet, you can have a cellular backup that's like ready to just fail over to cellular if your primary connection goes down. So these are easy ones. What about like water coming into your home in the early unsophisticated days, before our infrastructure?
I have a pond.
You have, exactly. You have a homestead, you have water catchment and a stream. Okay. So you have these options. These days though, you have a water company. There's no second set of pipes coming in, and so like that's where you get your water. and at some point, this technology infrastructure is evolving to the same point where essentially it's just a service that we rely on, and it's there like 99.999% of the time. And when you have some kind of like systemic issue, that's people sometimes have to like go to a friend's house to drink water. Like you figure out
Yep.
something else because the system is down. So
And even things like GPS, right?
Mhm.
Like we become completely reliant on GPS. No one has maps in their car anymore. We just assume it's going to work. If
Yeah.
it stops working, that's a problem. If you're on a trip in a completely unfamiliar place, like if like you lose your GPS capabilities, yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen. That's just
Yeah.
it. If it actually happened often enough,
Mhm.
people and I remember when we had the GPS and still had the old maps in the car.
Right.
And then at some point, we're just like, yeah, we haven't used those in 10 years.
Yeah.
They're probably not even accurate anymore.
Well, exactly. And I don't even know how to
right?
read them anymore. So yeah.
What are these squiggly lines?
Right.
It's terrible.
Yeah. No, I'm all about redundancy and like, plan B, and like let's not assume that everything we rely on every day is always going to be there. But in practical terms, it's really hard to come up with solutions.
And I do think that I do think it's easy to get caught up in the people these days, why when I was a kid kind of thing. And I call BS on that because
Yeah.
technology has always been the case. What? You can't tell what direction you're going by reading the moss on the trees? You need a compass? What are you, some loser? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, what do you mean you can't read the stars or, or tell by, like, come on, like,
Right.
we've always had technology. We've always been reliant on the next technology, and there's pluses and minuses to that. And the pluses have to outweigh the minuses or the technology doesn't continue. But the fact that we keep moving forward means the pluses do outweigh the minuses.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. All we can do is try to mitigate some of the risk in the meantime. And otherwise you just got to, hope for the best, I guess. Yeah.
So one thing to note, because it came up really briefly, I just wanted to mention. So because the bootable duplicates are really not the thing anymore, the alternative is you reinstall Mac OS, or you get a new machine and you've got a clean Mac OS, and then use Migration Assistant.
Yeah.
Apple has put a great deal of effort into Migration Assistant over the years. It's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job most of the time. And the two places you can recover from Migration Assistant are Time Machine and one of those duplicates. So Carbon Copy Clone, SuperDuper, ChronoSync can make duplicates, whether or not they're bootable.
Right.
And in some sense, there's no harm in making them bootable if you can. Even if it doesn't work to boot them, they're still perfectly fine data backups. And so that's a little bit of partly why I think bootable duplicates, they were great. We just need to move on. Like,
I kind of feel
it's
the same
not
way
something
at
to
this
rely on
point.
because it's just not that hard to reinstall Mac OS and bring back Migration Assistant and be back where you were in relatively little time. I mean, it's not going to be as quick.
Yeah.
But really, by the time you've been troubleshooting all the reasons why your bootable duplicate isn't working, you probably got the same amount of, 2 hours later. Yep. Oh, if I had just reinstalled Mac OS and restored from migration, done Migration Assistant, I'd be back up and running. So I'm not sure there's that much of a big win there.
Especially
anymore.
Migrating from a SSD clone. I mean, that'll be quick enough where it's not that big a deal for most people. Yeah, I think you're right about that. The other thing I was curious about though is that Apple does have to maintain some kind of ability to create a bootable like system on an external drive of some sort if they're going to continue to support installing Mac OS from like a flash drive or that kind of thing. Do they still support that? I haven't actually tried that with Sequoia, but I did.
I've tried it with Sequoia, but I've done it. I've done previous versions of macOS fairly recently.
That would be the one reason I would think that Apple would maybe maintain the system of ASR.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from talking to some of the developers in play here is that they're serious about ASR. I mean, it's not like, we don't care.
Yeah,
but it's not the primary. They're not seeing as the primary way of doing things. So it is always going to be a secondary approach compared to booting into macOS Recovery and using Migration Assistant. Those are really the ones that are going to be getting the attention.
That makes total sense. And I've had great results with Migration Assistant. So,
and I do see on Apple support article that there is a method for Sequoia. So
Okay, amazing.
Great.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that, I mean, I imagine that was probably broken if ASR was broken in terms of making a bootable backup. I wonder if that
Possibly.
wasn't working
Yeah.
for a few versions. Yeah.
One never knows. I mean, like in some sense, the only reason why we hear about this is when someone runs into it. So like if we super duper people basically super duper threw an error because ASR broke, and so
Wow.
that was where that happened. But like if there hadn't been an error, like if it's this like is now where it will make the bootable duplicate and you will not be able to boot from it, no one's going to say anything because they're not actually testing it.
Yeah. Right. Interesting. Wow.
I
Well,
long
it's
for
always
the
an
days of,
education. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I long for the days of the PhD. Bring back the PhD. Portable home
Home
directory.
directory. Ah,
Oh, God, my
nice.
nightmare.
I know. Oh man, do not bring those back, please.
Yeah, those are awful.
So, that's my least favorite type of mobile home, I will say.
I recall seeing a Steve Jobs video where he had talked about, you could have your PhD in a thumb drive and you could go to any computer and just plug it in. And,
wow.
yeah.
Love that idea. Yeah. Good in theory,
Well,
but
yeah, I mean, what I was more taken with is that particularly for those, and you see it among kids a lot now, where just everything they do is in the cloud, and they can just pop from machine to machine to machine without even thinking about it. We're really back to the thin client, or the dumb terminal in some ways. It's not quite the dumb terminal because like there is the the apps tend to be local. But even then, like it's built-in apps or they're using the cloud apps. So we are not too far away from that thin client concept that what was that back in the 90s, I think it was, when we were just starting.
Terminal server and stuff.
You're spot on with that. Absolutely. It's coming, especially with the prevalence of cloud-based stuff and things like that. There's not a whole lot on that local system that would necessarily need to be preserved, especially in a work environment.
That's why I don't need a backup.
Right. It's all on
Who needs
anyway.
Why are we doing this anyway? This is a lot of work for nothing.
Who cares?
Nothing ever goes wrong.
Yeah. Well, Adam, it's always an education talking to you. I really appreciate you, bringing this topic up to our attention and to our listeners and sparking all this conversation about backups and disaster recovery in general. And I look forward to always the next edition of Tidbits Content Network. I wanted to also thank you because I'll be talking about this topic in a future episode about I want to talk about the Amazon affiliate program, but specifically thanking you for the article you did about recommendations, like gear recommendations, which monitors. Yeah, you research all this stuff, monitors and hard drives and SSDs, and so I had a page on my website that I kind of maintained for my own internal use, and I've taken that and really enhanced it with the content you provided after being inspired by Jerry, who did the same thing, and now actually linking that so I can have my customers actually go to my website and click for some recommendations.
It's one of those things where there's so much out there, and like I'm not pretending these are the only possible options by any stretch, but just sometimes you just need if you get this, you'll be fine.
Yeah, some kind of filter. Yeah, totally.
And I had to do it myself. In fact, I was doing something where I needed to play video from my video on a SD card in AVCHD format on my MacBook Air, and I was like, I need a new USB-C SD card hub reader thing. I was like, because I tend to accumulate stuff, and I don't know how old it is or if it works and that kind of thing. And I couldn't test this a week I had COVID, and I was like, wait, I wrote about one of those, and I literally went and bought the Anchor USB-C hub that has the SD card reader, and it works brilliantly. I'm like,
exactly, nice. Yeah, curation. It's something that is just there isn't enough human curated lists like this. The Wirecutter is another great example. It's pretty much the only one that comes to mind. Otherwise, it's something that's going to be, just skewed by, affiliate marketing or, bots doing reviews and things like that. So
or you get the random Chinese companies where they just put some letters together to make a name.
Yeah, totally. There's 50 of those, yeah, I want to know what's the supported brand where I can actually get support if I need it, and other people have used it and tested it, and it's not sending my data to a third party.
I'm really glad to hear that was useful because
it was very useful.
It was a bit of work, but it was definitely one of those things of what 4K displays are people recommending?
Totally. Yeah, it's a very useful service. Well, thank you again. As we wrap up here, Adam Engst of Tidbits Content Network. We always look forward to having you on. Been a great episode. Thanks again.
Always fun to be here, and glad we got a chance to talk about this stuff. it's just, yeah, something people got to think about, and they don't want to.
Totally.
Everybody knows Adam that's listening to this, Joe. But if you don't know Adam, where can we find him in terms of if we're a consultant and we need something for our blog? What do we do? What do we do?
Go to TCN, Tidbits Content Network, .tidbits.com. It's a very simple, you subscribe $125 a month and you get 4 full articles and 4 tips every month. Just changed my schedule. So it's now the first Friday of every month, because the first business day of the month was killing me because I hit Mondays more often than it should, because of course the weekends. So I'm like, this is a bad idea. So, but so the first Friday of every month, you'll get all this stuff. If you use WordPress, it dumps right in. You can dump it right into your machine as posts, your server's posts. And others, we have Word documents, and we have various other ways of getting it into your systems if that's good. But the whole point is to basically say, you guys are expert in this stuff, but you don't always have time to write up or do that final bit of research into this kind of thing. And so the whole point is to give you something that you can do anything you want with. In fact, you can put, you can change it, you can add to it, you can just put it up because you're too busy, whatever works for you. And,
a lot of listeners, subscribers share your content out on LinkedIn as their own.
Yep.
And it gives them high profile, high visibility. It's if you just did that alone, you'd seem like a super smart guy in the tech world.
And the other big win I hear from people is a monthly email newsletter to all your clients. And it's not that, because it's not salesy, right? You're telling them useful stuff.
Right.
And you can just pick one article, one tip, something like that, send it out. And what I hear from people time and time again is you get calls from people you haven't heard from in a while.
Yep.
Because, now I have this problem and I just got this thing that looked really useful, and maybe they can help me with my problem. Yes.
Yep.
That's right.
Totally.
Yep.
And it always makes me look like a good writer too. So it's
Exactly.
very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that.
Yeah,
happen just a
if
few
you
weeks
were,
ago.
if
Somebody
you
wrote
were in
back
a
who I
super,
haven't heard from. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Jerry.
I'm sorry. I just get excited when what I was going to
We're
say
all
was
excited.
If you weren't such a, and this is not to blow sunshine in your sky, Adam, but if you weren't such a super smart guy, it would be an okay service. But you're so smart and you've got so much to say, and your articles are brilliant that it's just a no-brainer.
Totally. Yeah.
And
Highly
now
recommend
you
it.
are super smart and have
Exactly.
Or at least we look that way. Yeah.
right.
You make us look good. We really appreciate it.
That's my goal. You guys look fabulous.
Nice.
Amazing. Well, thanks again to Adam Engst of Tidbits Content Network. That's tcn.tidbits.com. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Talk to you again soon.